When it comes to reversing diabetes, some people are trusting in tools that just aren't that powerful. Some say, I'll trust the glycemic index. That will tell me everything I need to know. I'll just check out the glycemic index and I'll be fine. Others trust in limiting their sugar. I'm not going to eat too much sugar anymore. That'll fix me right up. And some people think fiber is the magic pill that will solve everything. Just sprinkle some fiber over everything you eat and all will be well. Well, sadly, none of those are all that effective. But on the program today, I'll share a couple of things that really do work and really can help you drive diabetes away from your door. This person says, after 2 years and 4 months, I have lowered my A1C to 5.4. I thought I'd never have this low a number. That's exciting. She says, I had to remove the hidden sugar and carbs from my diet. Hidden sugar and carbs. Well, that's very important. You know, a lot of time when you think about sugar, you only think about the sugar bowl. And you say, well, okay, no more sugar bowl. When I was a kid, we had a sugar bowl that was always on our table. And, I would have, I could eat the non-sweet cereals. I divided cereals into two groups. You had the sweet ones like Sugar Pops, Lucky Charms, Trix, and so forth. And then you had the non-sweet ones like shredded wheat and Wheaties. I don't know if they even make Wheaties anymore, do they? But things like Bran Flakes. Now, Cheerios, again, not very sweet, but and I would eat those non-sweet cereals, but I would go to my sugar bowl and dump several tablespoons of sugar on it, and then it would be just fine. So for a lot of people, when they think about, okay, I'm diabetic, I've got to give up the sugar, they think about the sugar bowl. But folks, there's a whole lot more sugar in a whole lot more foods than you even realize. And so many foods on your grocery store shelves are loaded with sugar. These people that make foods and produce foods and sell foods, they're not idiots. They're not going to sell something you don't like to eat or that tastes mediocre. They want something you'll enjoy, and people love sweet. They love sweet things. They love sugar. So they sweeten up their cereals, and they sweeten up their yogurts, and they sweeten their ketchup, and they sweeten this, and they sweeten that, until you can hardly buy any food from the refrigerator except in the produce section, among the vegetables, that isn't sweet, or the meat. So anyway, she says, I had to give up the hidden sugar and carbs. Now, some people, they'll say, why do you talk about looking at the carbs? Should you not look at the sugar as well? The answer is no, I don't need to look at the sugar, because carbs are going to raise blood sugar, and sugar is a carb. So when I look at the total carbs, that includes the sugar. If it's high in sugar, it's going to be high in carbs. Plus, it may have some other carbs. So, for example, a fruit pie. A fruit pie is that you can buy at your grocery store, a little package. I used to love them. That's one of the worst foods you could ever buy when it comes to blood sugar. Because, number one, it's got the flour, and that flour itself is white flour, and it has carbs in it, and those carbs are going to turn into sugar. Number two, they sprinkle sugar throughout that filling, the bread coating that's over the fruit. So it's going to have extra sugar, plus the carbs that are in it are going to turn to sugar, plus the fruit has sugar, plus I think they add sugar to the fruit. So, it's sugar and carbs all the way through. And some of those fruit pies are twice as high in carbs as candy bars. So a lot of people will buy a fruit pie and feel good about themselves and pat themselves on the back. Aren't I a good little boy, a good little girl? I'm not eating a Snicker bar. I'm not eating a candy bar. No, I'm too wise for that. I'm too health conscious for that. I'm going to have a good, healthy fruit pie. That's not 10 times worse. It's twice as bad as a candy bar. And it's worse than probably most pieces of cake or slices of pie, regular pie. So anyway, when you look at the total carbs, you found out just how much damage that food can do to you. When I was in my earlier stages, I hardly looked at carbs for a while because I let Mike, the blood sugar meter, tell me whether a food was acceptable or not. So I would test myself an hour afterwards, hour and a half afterwards, and I would see how high I spiked, and if it was too much, I wouldn't eat it. But after a while, I realized I could pretty much predict my spike based on how many carbs it had. Not always, and there are going to be some surprises, but oftentimes I could predict my spike based on the carbs. And another thing I quickly learned to do is compare any food to a candy bar, because the average candy bar has somewhere around 32 to 35, 36 grams of carbs. So eat a candy bar, 35 grams of carbs. So if I see a product that has around 30-some grams of carbs, I say to myself, you might as well be eating a candy bar. And for example, a serving of rice is going to have around 30-some grams of carbs with very little fiber, especially if it's white rice. But even the brown rice has not that much fiber. So a serving of rice, candy bar, not much different. One time I read that barley was very low on the glycemic index. I thought, okay, great. There is a food that I can enjoy, some good old barley. What could be healthier than barley? And it's low on the glycemic index. But when I looked at a package of barley and I saw that a typical serving had 30-some grams of carbs, I was like, well, we're at the candy bar level already. So I've often found that when it comes to foods, just look at the carbs. That will include the sugars, and that's going to tell you what you're going to have to pay out, you might say. And some people say, yeah, but if it's low on the glycemic index, it won't hit you as hard. Well, I will grant that. And low glycemic is better than high glycemic. But, sometimes you got to realize if it's got too many carbs, even if they're stretched out a little bit longer than usual, it's still just too much for your diabetic body to handle. I mean, in some ways, it's like some man that barely makes the minimum wage. He just doesn't have any money to spare. He goes to the banker and says, I want to buy a house. I just love it. My real estate agent showed it to me. And they say, well, what does it cost? He says, well, it's $10 million. And the guy says, and how much do you make? Well, I'm at minimum wage. So you want to buy a house that's $10 million at minimum wage. And the guy says, well, I'm not an idiot. I realize that I can't afford to pay it all at once, but what I'll do is I'll divide it over 30 years of payments and I can pay for this $10 million house. No, you can't. Even if you divide it into little nice monthly payments for 30 years, you still couldn't afford that. And there are some people that look at something that brags about being a low glycemic index, and they say, well, I can afford that. But the truth is, if you look at the carbs, there are so many carbs to that even dividing it out and the fact that it may not hit you all at once, it's still way too many. And I mean, the ultimate test is the blood sugar test and see what your meter tells you about how high you spike and how long you spike and so forth. But don't be fooled if something brags about the low glycemic index. It's just not enough. I found that with quinoa. I had one of our commenters suggest that we try buckwheat, which we did. We made an episode about buckwheat. But when I looked at the package of buckwheat, I knew this is going to be a problem because it had 30-some grams of carbs for one serving. And so, I just like to zero in on the carbs usually. And the carbs and Mike the meter aren't very far apart. If I see something past about 30 grams of carbs, Mike's going to tell me, Dennis, you blew it. Now, this is not really working for you. So, that's how I do it. Here's a person who asked the question, how about eating jasmine rice with high-fiber ground flax added to it? Will the fiber offset the carbs in the rice so as not to spike glucose levels? And I've heard this several times from people because they hear me talking about how you can deduct fiber carbs from the total carbs and you can get net carbs, and typically fiber carbs don't spike blood sugar. And that's true. But you don't gain anything much by adding fiber to something that's already high in carbs. Some people think, okay, if fiber carbs are so good for blood sugar, that if I get a high carb item like a bowl of Trix cereal and I throw some flaxseed on top of it, I can deduct all those and it won't be high in carbs anymore and I can enjoy my Trix cereal. No, you can't. You're just adding to it. And you're taking back away from what you added, but it's still going to have all those carbs. So that just doesn't work typically. It's kind of like if I've got a big bowl full of jelly, which is going to spike my blood sugar like crazy, and then I take some flax seeds and sprinkle them on top of my bowl of jelly, I'm still going to deal with the same amount of carbs. Those flax seeds won't add anything to it much because flax seeds are almost all fiber. But they're not going to take anything away from it. That jelly, let's say that jelly is 100 grams of carbs, I'm still going to have 100 grams of carbs to deal with. It doesn't matter whether I add a mountain of flaxseed on top. I'm still going to have all kinds of carbs coming from that jelly. And the flaxseed could mitigate it a little bit, but not that much. So don't think you can just sprinkle some fiber on top of a super high carb food and all is well. All would not be well. Okay, that's it for now. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up so the YouTube algorithm is going to recognize its value and promote it to others. And consider subscribing to our channel and then click that little bell icon so you'll be notified whenever we post new videos. God bless. See you again soon.